We're going to start. This very special meeting of the Township Council is called to order. Madam Clerk.
In accordance with the Open Public Meeting Act of the State of New Jersey, adequate notice of this special meeting of the Franklin Township Council was made by the posting on the bulletin board, posted on the Township's website, and electronically transmitted to the officially designated newspapers, indicating that this special meeting would take place at the Municipal Building, Council Chambers at 7 p.m.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States. Republic for which it's God, indivisible. Madam Clerk, call the roll, please.
Councilman Barrison?
Here.
Councilwoman Francois?
Here.
Mayor Kramer?
Here.
Councilman Onijaka? Councilmember Potosnik?
Present.
Deputy Mayor Pruitt?
Here.
Councilwoman Udine? Councilman Vassanara?
Here.
Councilman Wright?
So let me explain why we're here tonight, why we're having a special meeting. On, I believe it was January 13th, the Township Clerk received a valid petition, which basically is requiring us to have a referendum on this November's ballot for energy aggregation. That what that is will be explained during the meeting. There are 5, what are we calling them? Petitioners listed, and they kind of control the reins of this. We can discuss with them how we might want to change what the referendum says. They're kind of in charge, and council's had one meeting with them discussing how we might make changes to the referendum. The purpose of this meeting is so that everyone can be up to speed on what energy aggregation is, what our options are, what's the good points and the bad points of it. Energy aggregation usually is done through, I'll call it a broker, and they'll correct me later if I'm wrong. Is that the right term, broker? So I'm corrected that it's an energy consultant, kind of administrates it. One of the ones that's well known in the state is Gable Associates. So we have Bob Chilton from Gable Associates, who's going to do a presentation. That'll be followed by questions from council. That'll be followed by questions from the petitioners, and that will be followed by questions from the audience. So with no further ado, Mr. Chilton.
Thank you, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, members of the council, for hosting this forum today, and hopefully.
Yeah, you got to get pretty close to the mic.
All right, you got it. It's over the TV waves. You got it. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for having me here to help you sort through the ins and outs of energy aggregation. Again, my name is Bob Chilton. I'm an executive vice president with Gable Associates, where actually our offices are right over in Highland Park here, and we've done dozens of these types of programs over the past 10 plus years. So hopefully I can share some of the insights and wisdom we have, and happy to answer any questions. And Bob, you're working the reins. Okay.
I am.
Ready to go. You can flip on to the next one. So how does it work? And this is holding aside the issue of the referendum. This is sort of in the rules of the state as administered by the Board of Public Utilities. This is how the program would operate. Most towns do and pass an ordinance. The governing body passes an ordinance, so I'm referring to the ordinance, but a referendum could act in lieu of that as far as the legal process. But essentially, the purpose of the program like this and the purpose of the original law that was passed in the state to allow this type of program is to allow municipality to pool its residents together to create purchasing power to obtain hopefully a better price, better terms and conditions, including if a town wishes additional renewable energy content. All of this as compared to what a resident can typically get if they're shopping on their own in the marketplace. So under the regulations and the laws, the municipality passes an ordinance or there's a referendum passed in the town to establish the program. An agreement is signed with the local electric utility to help support the program, and then away you go. So what happens early in the process is there's a public bidding process through which the town will go out to the market to seek quotes from licensed suppliers. The first step is those draft bid documents are prepared and submitted to the Board of Public Utilities and Division of Rate Counsel. They review them to make sure that they're consistent with the state rules on these programs. And again, as I mentioned, the rules allow a town to include an enhanced renewable content in the program. And in such an instance, we usually stick R in front of the program. It's called RGEA, Renewable Government Energy Aggregation. Okay. So the whole point here is creating purchasing power and then attracting competition, so suppliers are bidding on the business of the town and by extension the town's residents. So we're putting the residents together to access the power supply in the marketplace. And the town, with the help of an energy consultant, is setting the terms and conditions of the program. Typically in the marketplace, if a customer is going out into the retail marketplace, the suppliers dictate the terms and conditions, and customers may or may not be savvy enough to read the fine print in those terms and conditions before they enter into an agreement. So here, the town, with the advisement of an energy consultant and with the overarching rules in place that the state puts in, the town is setting the terms and conditions of the deal. So the state's renewable portfolio standard mandates a specific amount of renewable content in any energy supplier's portfolio, and that's any competing supplier or the utility itself if folks are buying power from the utility. The current requirement is 24.5% renewable, and that required percentage is going up over time per the rules set by the state. The amount of extra renewable energy content, that's determined by the municipality, totally within your discretion. So essentially, the supplier is required to have 24.5, and then a town wishing to do an RGEA program will determine and ultimately dictate how much additional renewable above the 24.5%. Sustainable Jersey, which is a not-for-profit organization in New Jersey that is promoting sustainability amongst municipalities, has two specific products that they are endorsing with additional points towards certification for towns. One is an additional 10% renewable energy, and one is an additional 20% renewable energy, again, above and beyond what the state already requires. And towns can go higher as they wish. But as I always advise towns, there's a trade-off here, right? Renewable energy is more expensive than traditional grid-supplied, fossil fuel-powered generation. So if you want additional content, there's going to be an additional price premium. The higher the renewable content, the bigger the premium. So the program also features a number of consumer protections. Again, most of these are overlain by the state's rules. The town sets the terms and conditions. Contract terms are reviewed by the State Board of Public Utilities and Division of Rate Counsel. The price is established up front. It's known for the full length of the contract. There cannot be what's called commonly a bait and switch, which is very common in the competitive marketplace, where suppliers may offer a very attractive rate that may be good for only 3 months or 6 months, and then after that, the rate goes up to quote-unquote market, which can be exorbitant in some cases. The length of the contract is specifically defined. It cannot be automatically renewed by the supplier unilaterally at the end of the initial term. It can only be renewed by the municipality. There's no fine print for customers to worry about. In fact, individual customers do not sign a contract. It is the town that signs a master contract with the supplier. Once a contract's in place, residents can opt out and switch back to PSE&G power supply or another supplier if they so choose at any time without penalties or fees. So other features of the program, transparency. Again, the price is advertised, it is published, it is known, it does not change, as well as the renewable energy content. Again, customers have choice. Any resident can opt out of the program at any time without any penalty or fee. The charges would show up on the PSE&G bill. So if a customer is involved in this program, the third-party supplier's charges appear right on their utility bill, so there's no change in the way billing takes place. And so basically the whole thing is overseen by the municipality, looking out for the local concerns and, the local priorities. As I mentioned at the top, dozens of municipalities across New Jersey have done these programs over the last 10 years. Vast majority in our experience who have done a first program have decided to do a second and in some cases third and fourth round of the program. So overall, while municipalities tend to be very wary going in, and rightfully so, the experience has typically been positive, and then most towns that have done these the first time have repeated the program. So just a quick on us. It's not a commercial, but just independent energy consultant, whether it's us or another firm helping the town. And importantly, and it's the distinction why I don't call us a broker. A broker typically is working for a supplier to try to drum up business. An energy consultant like us, we're registered with the state. We are acting on behalf of the client, in this case the municipality. We have no business relationship with any particular supplier, so we're basically an independent arbiter to help a town go through the bid process, select a supplier, and then administer the program. Enough said there. I didn't want to get too much into that. So the timeline. General timeline from the passage of an ordinance or a referendum is around 6 months from the start of the process until the flow of power supply in a best case scenario. Again, as I mentioned, there are several phases of this. The bid documents have to be drafted, reviewed by the town first, and then they're submitted to the state for their review to make sure they're consistent with rules. And then we run what we call a two-stage or two-part request for proposals process, where we advertise. The RFP goes out to the streets to attract suppliers. There's a first phase where suppliers submit all of their qualifications and their legal forms to basically vet their ability to do this kind of program. And then in phase 2, we actually seek competitive price quotes. And then one thing is the governing body, because of the volatility of energy markets, a supplier can't bid a price and then hold it for weeks on end. Typically, a decision is made that same evening by the governing body when the bids come in. And then after the bid is completed, there's a process for notification of customers, education, and then what we call an opt-out process, where residents are given a 30-day period to review the details of the program and decide whether or not they want to remain in or opt out of the program. So for participants, there's a mailing that will go out several weeks after the bid is, the contract is awarded. It goes out to all residents in the town with three exceptions, rather. One is if someone already has their own third-party supply contract, they are pulled out of the program by state rule. They're not allowed to be in the program initially because they already have their own contract. And so we don't want this program to automatically supersede that contract. Secondly, if folks have a solar panel system on their home, those folks are pulled out. I can really get into the weeds on this, but essentially the vast majority of folks that have solar are better off not being on a third-party supply contract, whether under this program like this or on their own. And then third is if any residents have contacted the municipality and asked for what's called a do not disturb, that the state requires each town to have a do not disturb list if someone just does not want to be part of the program, and they indicate that at the outset, they're put in a special do not disturb list and they're not involved in the mailing. So aside from those three subcategories of customers, which combined are typically less than 10%, maybe or less than 5% of a typical town, The mailing goes out. It includes an introductory letter, a program summary that's sort of a matrix, and then a 1 or 2 page frequently asked questions that describes the program. And so all residents who receive this have a 30-day period to decide whether to opt out. Also, during that 30-day period, typically the energy consultant like us will conduct 1 or more public information sessions, not unlike this, but more detailed, for folks to come and to understand more about the program, ask questions, et cetera, before they have to make that decision whether or not to opt out. If after the 30-day period, those folks who do not opt out are enrolled in the program, and even after that, though, they can still opt out anytime they want in month 1, month 6, month 10, whatever it is. Okay, so just a little more. So residents with their own third-party supply contract may participate, but they're not automatically included. And we always encourage folks to, take a look at your existing deal, look at the price, look at the pricing terms, look at the renewable content, and look at a lot of contracts in the fine print, not under this program, but other third-party suppliers will have very in fine print, they'll have fees for early termination. If someone wants to get out of their contract early, sometimes they have to pay a fee of $50, $100, et cetera. So we just ask that folks look at, if they have a current deal, look at it very closely before you decide to get out of that and participate in the program. Customers with solar panels, typically, most of them typically will have an arrangement with the utility which is called banking, which means in the summertime when the solar panels are producing a ton of electricity, typically more than the customer can use on a monthly basis, the excess electricity goes into a bank, and that bank is then worked off typically in the winter months when the solar output's very low, so that the customer gets full retail price credit for all of their solar production. Third-party suppliers do not have the ability to offer that same subsidy, if you will. So that's why we encourage most folks, we initially take everyone who's got solar out of the program and then ask them to look very, very closely before they opt into the program to make sure they don't rely on this banking program where they're better off essentially not being in a program like this. Importantly, so it says recap, but I think I might have missed emphasizing this earlier on. When the bid is done, the results are brought to the governing body for a decision. And the decision on whether to award a contract is 100% in your hands. So what we would do is simply, first we would do an evaluation of the qualifications of the suppliers, and then we'll evaluate the bids as compared to the current and expected utility tariff price. And we will advise you whether or not that the price that's being offered is, above the same or below the utility tariff price. And then the decision is 100% in your hands, whether that it meets whatever standards you have in place for awarding a contract. The state rules simply say for a product with the standard amount of renewable content, a municipality cannot award a contract at a price higher than the utility tariff, cannot. If the product has higher renewable content than the state mandate, the municipality is permitted to award a contract at a price higher than the utility tariff, but you're not required to do so. 100% your discretion, and you don't make that decision until after the bids come in. And that includes, take a half a step back. Even if the town, either if the governing body were to pass an ordinance forming the program or the town passed a referendum, either case, that legal action provides the authority for a town to run a program, i.e. to go out to the market. It does not bind the governing body to make an award of an actual contract. That's completely in your discretion. So, okay, just by way of example, so you've got, for instance, the Sustainable Jersey endorsed product, which is 20% higher than the renewable content required in New Jersey. That would mean right now that it would have a 44.5% renewable energy content, and that will go up over time. The renewable standards are going up pretty rapidly starting next year in the state. to the point where by 2030 it will be 50% standard product, not even with enhanced. And then what some towns do, because there are some folks in town that may want a very aggressive 100% renewable product and may be willing to pay for that additional cost, but to not require the town to go out to bid for that product for everyone, because I can tell you that will be an expensive product. What more and more towns have done recently is they've included a voluntary, what we call an opt-up 100% product, where individual customers can select the 100% product at a price premium relative to the standard contract price that you've awarded. So most of this I mentioned. I want to see if there's anything I haven't mentioned. So the contract price is what we call non-variable. It does not change monthly like many other offerings in the marketplace do. It is a set price that will stay the level for the entire length of the contract. Again, customers can opt out either during the 30-day opt-out period or any time thereafter, and there can never be a penalty or fee for opting out. So again, no hassle. The charges for the supplier appear right on the PSE&G bill, so there's no change in the way a customer is billed. You receive one bill. Nothing changes, and some customers don't necessarily appreciate this from the outset. Just because you're changing suppliers doesn't change the way power is delivered or the reliability. PSE&G will remain, in any case, the entity that delivers the power and maintains the grid. That does not change. You still call the same number if the lights go out, et cetera. And then for those folks who are on budget billing, or what we call an equal payment plan, the bid specifications will always require that the supplier offer budget billing as well. So if a customer participates in the program, they won't lose budget billing. As well, any financial assistance program like low-income heating assistance, things of that nature, that's provided through the utility bill. So you'll still receive a utility bill, so the customer will still receive that assistance. So anyone on financial assistance will still have that assistance even if they participate in this kind of program. So that's it. I want to keep it kind of brief and then keep as much time as possible for questions.
Council, do you have questions?
I do, Mayor.
Go ahead.
First, I just wanted to have a clarifying question because you touched on something that I think is really important and a lot of people don't understand, the generation versus the distribution. So PSE-G versus PSE&G. Can you just kind of explain?
Right. So, So 23 years ago now, when the entire industry was changed by the state of New Jersey, the actual making of the electrons, the generation part of the business, was deregulated. And so there's now a wholesale marketplace where there are, dozens of providers of power supply. But the delivery service portion, the grid, that is still a regulated, fully regulated service that's regulated by the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities. And the PSE&G has to answer to the BPU regarding reliability. But the PSE&G, as a delivery company, they are also the power supplier of last resort. So anyone who doesn't access the competitive market, and they can remain with PSE&G, PSE&G provides the power supply as well in addition to delivery, but the utility no longer owns its own power plants. They go out into the marketplace, not unlike the process that the town would go through, to buy power in the competitive wholesale market to serve customers who do not choose it.
Thank you for explaining. I just wanted to make sure people understood.
Excellent. So you're right. A lot of people just scratch their head over
Yeah.
that.
And
I have one question.
go ahead.
Oh, you're still going?
You have to leave, so go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Wright and Ms.
Francois and I-
Francois have to leave, so we'll let them go first. Go
We
ahead,
have to
Carl.
go to a redevelopment agency meeting, but we'll be back in between, but
Go ahead, Carl, what's your question?
Oh, I thought you were asking.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Do you have any questions, Camille?
that's why I gave you the question.
All right, so Carl's question that he could have
Mr.
asked
Mayor.
while giving that preamble.
Mr. Mayor, can I just interject? So we have received complaints about the audio quality when council members are wearing masks. So what I'd ask is, if you want to wear your mask, that you please get very close to the microphone so that the audio is picked up, or else pull it down when you're talking, because you can't hear it on the TV.
Is this better? Oh,
That's
okay,
much
yes.
better.
I mean,
Thank you.
just because someone complains doesn't mean it's accurate. I mean, it could be just that we're not talking loud enough or close enough to the microphone. It could be nothing to do with the mask. I just want to clarify.
No, that's what I'm saying. If you're going to wear your mask, you need to speak close to the microphone.
Whether you wear a mask or not, you need to
Let's move on from masks and
So,
ask your question.
Carl's question, this is not mine. Carl's, what if in Florida, like the snowbirds, miss the 90-day opt-out, what happens then? So I guess if they're not home 30-day, I couldn't read his handwriting, I apologize. 30-day opt-out, that was Carl.
So I guess two answers. One is, if you're down south for the winter, you might have your mail forwarded, so that would address that. But let's assume you don't, because that's kind of what the question assumes. You would be, if you didn't see the notice and you didn't, talk to your friends and look online and see a replay of the public information session, you would initially be enrolled in the program. So basically the way an opt-out program works is you're in unless you opt out. So in that circumstance where someone was just completely oblivious to the program going on, they would be enrolled in the program. And then when they come back in, March or April, in that circumstance, if they, for some reason, decide they did not want to remain in the program, they could opt out at that time.
Okay. And I actually had, I wrote down just 3 questions based on the presentation, just for clarification. Does energy aggregation, does it include gas and electricity, or is it just electricity only?
Well, in theory, it could include gas as well.
Okay.
I can tell you that since this program began in 2012, it's been electric only. Natural gas, the way the utility prices natural gas, it is virtually impossible for the third-party suppliers to beat. So we as a firm have never even tried to do a gas program, and I'm not aware that anyone else has either.
Okay. And how much of our, is New Jersey's, I guess PSE&G specifically, their generation from electricity come from, quote-unquote, renewable sources or clean energy? Because I know we're a major nuclear manufacturer.
They are, but a couple things, and I was going to touch on it in response to your earlier question, but I guess I'll finish the thought now. So PSE&G, until fairly recently, all the road generating power plants that they had back as a utility, they kept in an unregulated affiliate. Those, other than the nuclear plants, have been sold off now, or in the process of being sold off. So PSE&G now is, and even their affiliate, they really are just buying in the marketplace. The nuclear power plants are an exception, but they are essentially acting as wholesale generating power plants where they sell to
Into the
suppliers.
marketplace, right.
So the bottom line is every supplier, be it PSE&G suppliers that they go out and get in the marketplace or anyone else, has the same required content of 24.5%.
Okay. And energy aggregation, I guess recognizing in the Energy Master Plan the impact of commercial and industrial in, our greenhouse emissions and, dirty energy, as we would call it. Does energy aggregation cover C&I, or is it solely residential?
So again, the law allows C&I to be included, but again, for a myriad of reasons, it has never really worked successfully. Much different, a couple of reasons just real quick. I don't want to get too much into the weeds, but a much higher percentage of C&I customers have already switched to third-party supply, so they wouldn't want to be part of this. And secondly, most C&I have a much different profile of how they use power. So they have a much different cost for a supplier to serve them. So if they were lumped in with residents, somebody would be subsidizing somebody. It just wouldn't work. So when we tried it early on, 10 years ago, we included some C&I. The process is reversed for C&I. They have to opt into the program. And first of all, there were very few C&I customers that even opted in that wanted to be participating. And secondly, the bids were just a colossal failure. There weren't enough customers interested for suppliers to bid on it, or the price was prohibitive, or things of that nature. So technically, yes, the answer to your question, but in practicality, no.
And my last question, based on the presentation you just did, which, thank you, was really informative. So, recognizing that, we're going to be moving to 50% in 2030, it's, 8 years from now. For the municipalities that have done this and continue to do this, is there any kind of quantitative impact analysis on what difference it's made overall? Like what is the barometer of success in terms of the overarching kind of climate change environmental goals, right? Because recognizing where you're buying your energy from is being produced in other places, so.
So the best I can tell you, and this is, I used to explain this because the way the suppliers get their renewable power is they buy renewable energy certificates in the marketplace.
If you want to explain the marketplace, that'd probably be helpful.
Oh, this is going to be a tough one. You may know, you sound like you're up on this, but this is a tough one. So a renewable power, any power plant produces energy, kilowatt hours of energy. A renewable power plant creates kilowatt hours of energy. They also create something called a renewable energy certificate, or REC for shorthand. REC is basically called the environmental attribute. That is the certificate that is used by suppliers to comply with renewable portfolio standards. And New Jersey has an RPS, as well as many other states in our region. So the REC is a separate commodity that is bought and sold to comply with renewable portfolio standards, or in the case of RGA programs, to go out and buy additional renewable energy to comply with a contract requirement. And so now let's go to the renewable energy marketplace side. Renewable energy developers, developing projects, wind projects, et cetera, they have basically three sources of revenue to finance and support, provide enough revenue to provide a return on investment. They have the sale of the energy that I mentioned. They have the sale of the RECs, and then they have investment tax credits. So those are three basically sources of revenue that have to create enough revenue to provide the financial incentive for folks to go out and develop projects to then meet the ever-increasing requirements. So that's sort of a background. Now, so the market price for RECs reflects supply and demand, right? And so a few years ago when I was explaining this kind of program, and some people were skeptical about RECs, are they really renewable energy? And the way I try to explain it is that, as I said, it's one of the important three sources of revenues for projects, without which people will not invest in new wind projects, solar, et cetera. And so as you create more demand for RECs through RPS or through RGA programs, demand and supply price will go up, right? And that's the theory. Now, in the last 2 years, with the increases in RPS and more of these programs, as well as other, I've seen many municipalities and school districts also purchase enhanced renewable. The market price for RECs has tripled in the last 2 years. So that means the price impact is higher, but it also means it's creating a stronger financial signal for folks to go out and actually invest in the next generation of wind projects and solar projects, et cetera. So it's absolutely critical. All these things, sort of combine to create a marketplace and then create a financial incentive for people to actually put their money where their mouths is and invest in these projects, because they see I have the revenue source to get my return on investment. That's how it works.
Okay, and you feel that's separate from the actual Murphy administration kind of pushing that? Is that in addition to, or is it working in tandem?
The Murphy administration is increasing the RPS. They did that in the Clean Energy Act in 2018. And that has certainly had an impact, as have similar actions in other states in our region. It's not just New Jersey, it's a regional market. As well as these RGA programs have also, I think, contributed to the increasing demand, which has driven the price, paradoxically has driven the price up, but it's creating a price signal for more renewable. So I would say the Energy Master Plan and the Clean Energy Act, and then independent actions of individual towns and customers and municipalities and school districts have further accelerated that process.
In full disclosure, I'm a former deputy in the Division of Clean Energy at BPU, so I know a little bit.
I was a division director at the BPU over 20 years ago.
So
we're talking the same language here. Probably no one knows what the heck we're talking about, but at least we're communicating.
Thank you. Those are my questions based on that.
Anyone else have questions?
I have a question. May I a couple of questions, if I may?
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you, Bob, for the information. So as a former consumer who got burned by some of these aggregators with the initial promotional rates, which was really good, and then, it goes up.
Yep.
And also, as a commercial real estate investor myself, I've had solar farm in my buildings, and I've sold SRECs on the open market, and unfortunately for me, when I installed the system, SRECs were high. By the time I got done and commissioned, the SRECs went down.
Right.
So it kind of extended my break-even period, which is fine. So I've got some first-hand experience, and I'm one of the 3 council members here also drives a Tesla, so we are committed to renewable energy everywhere. So I have a couple of questions from implementation point of view. You mentioned that Sustainable New Jersey recommends 20% more content, renewable content, in the electricity we would aggregate. What is your experience, or what's on the experience of the townships that went to 20% more on the content in terms of rates to the consumers? Do you have any data on that?
I mean, I have a lot of experience with it, and it's changed over time. So, 2-3 years ago, when energy market prices were much, much lower, and also the REC prices were lower, right? So you could get a product 20% above the standard product and still get a price below the tariff. And the price premium at that time maybe was maybe like 3% for the extra 20%, not a big deal. Now, let's dial forward 3 years from now. Energy markets are crazy. So it's very, very challenging to get any savings at all, even notwithstanding renewable content. Now, as I said, REC prices have tripled in the last 3 years. So now that same 20% additional would add another, now it's something like, maybe closer to 10% price premium, 5 and 10%, which, can make all the difference when the energy price alone is already higher. So we've actually seen some towns dial it back and say, I just did a bid about a month ago for a town who had a 20% product in their first contract. The second time around, we put a 10% additional in because we all understood that we were going to have a challenge to get a decent price as it was. So we dialed that back. And then we also included 100% renewable product for those, if there's some folks in the town that really want to be aggressive, don't mind paying more, we included that 100% voluntary product. So we've kind of morphed into that. It always changes with market conditions, but right now we're sort of pushing towards the lower amount of additional, but then having that opt-up product for those people that really don't mind paying more for a very aggressive product.
But I guess people can choose if they want more content. They can always choose to pay more on the step-up
That's
program that you
voluntary. Choose the 100%, that's 100% voluntary.
Opt-up program is it? Okay, thank you. So I have a second question, which is kind of together. So you mentioned that the township signs a contract with the aggregator, and then you would, your company or a consultant like you would administer that contract? Is that
right? So we can do everything for the town basically, except pass ordinances and resos and things like that.
Yeah.
So one of the main things that we do after the contract, before the contract, we basically administer the bid process, prepare the bid documents, make sure they get filed with the BPU for comment, and there's various paperwork that has to be done. And then after the bid, if there's a contract award, what we do is we have a customer support team, through email or through phone, where we basically are there to answer questions from the residents who, they get a bill their first month in the program. What is this? I don't understand it.
Yeah.
I don't understand the charges. They can reach out to us and we'll answer those questions, because the last thing most towns want is now a flood of, you've already got a lot to do.
Yeah.
And now you get a bunch of calls on energy issues that you may not, notwithstanding maybe one council member, may not all be that well versed in, right? So that's another function that we play is to kind of take those, on your behalf, answer questions and kind of resolve questions as they come up.
Okay, so that was my next part of my question. So these instances where townships have adopted energy aggregation, have, in case they don't utilize your services or any consultant services, are those functions, like, looking at the bills, fielding calls and calling the energy companies, because we have the contract, have you seen any increase in admin support time or cost in terms of additional people having to do this work? Or in a case where you would you would be taking the calls, your phone number is given out from our website or whatever. Now, what is the cost that is added to the rate in this whole equation?
So, answer your first question. I've never seen a town take this on their own. They've all hired energy consultants, and I think even Sustainable Jersey recommends that for towns doing these kinds of programs. The way we get paid is we, through whatever process where you hire a consultant, we propose a fee. It's a per kilowatt hour fee that is would be charged to the supplier would pay us. The winning supplier would pay us. So it's included in their bid price, so it's not an out-of-pocket expense for the town. At least in our case, it's a very, very small fee. It's probably 1% of the price, maybe. Probably less than 1% of the price now.
So the town goes out to bid for consultants.
Yeah, there are other ways that you could do it. You could either go through a procurement process to hire a consultant, or there are a couple of other contracting vehicles, which sort of get into the details of Department of Community Affairs rules, which I don't want to get into here. But either way, either through a competitive process or through another vehicle, the consultant or consultants are proposing a fee level, and then you make a selection or negotiate the fee, or you select the low bidder, as the case may be.
Okay. Any other questions?
I get a few, Mayor.
Councilman Gassinella was...
I just would like to ask one question and clarify what the gentleman just said about how. So there are state-approved consultants for this purpose, correct, that have been awarded, I don't want to say a state contract because it's a little bit different, but you are a state-authorized vendor for this particular purpose, are you not?
Right. I don't want to be... So just to be clear, so firms like us are required to register as energy consultants and also as an energy agent. Those are two separate registrations with the BPU, which enables us to act on customers' behalf through a GEA program, or we also use that to buy on behalf of towns and school districts and private businesses, et cetera. So there isn't a specific, a registration specific to GEA programs, but just to acting on customers' behalf to do deals. And then you will find, if you went through a procurement process, that there are a small handful of energy consultants and energy agents registered with the state that specialize in this kind of buying.
Right, and because we don't pay you, that's when you put out an RFP, it's only those firms that would submit proposals, because otherwise there would be really no reason to choose a firm that's not approved by the BPU.
Right. I mean, you would first make a requirement they are registered energy consultant and energy agent.
Right.
And then beyond that, you would ask them for their qualifications running this specific kind of program.
Councilman Gassinella.
Let's have a few questions. Just to pick up on what Councilman Wright had passed along the question a little while back, and he's back, so maybe he'll want to pick up on it when it gets back down this end. He used the example of people being out of town for the winter, but it could be whether it's a language barrier, we have 60-some languages spoken here, whether it's, I know I get a piece of mail at least once a week for somebody else's address. So obviously it's not going to happen to the majority, but you have a lot of reasons why somebody may, or they get their mail. There's no language barrier. They just put it aside. We're all into this. I think everybody up here in the audience and most people at home are interested. They want a lower carbon footprint and they want to save money. But as we always say, 99% of people in town are just not tuned in and really don't care what government's doing in their busy lives. You have a 30-day opt-out, and I don't know if this is where Councilman Wright was going with it, but a lot of people, I know that's come up, and I've read a lot about questions and these details which can get confusing, but there's a lot of legitimate reasons why somebody may just come home and find they have been removed from a company they may have been using for 40 years and now with another company they've never heard of. Is there a reason why yourselves who get involved with this and other groups haven't lobbied the state? My understanding is this law hasn't been touched, rewritten, made better in 20-plus years. Is there a reason why that 30-day window, which nowadays the way people live has almost become, just in need of review? So that's the first question, and I just want to pick up on the question from earlier. And then the thing about the cost, if the referendum passes, whatever it is, you have choices of how much renewable, whatever. The law says we can't sign a contract that doesn't give the customer at least the option to save money. Well, that would be true in a moment, but if 6 months down the road, and these are the things I'm just reading, some of it may be myth, some of it may be legitimate concern, some of it may be things Trenton can go back and improve this program, which I think rewritten could be really just be in place across the state. But anyway, in a year from now, if those prices go down for electric, but it's a 2-year contract, I say go down in the general marketplace, somebody would be paying more. In the beginning, they see, oh, I'm saving $6 a month, 8, 10, just those seem to be the amounts, somewhere but $100 a year people can save. I've seen lower and higher, and maybe you can elaborate on the reality of the cost savings. But what happens if they're saving their money, and any amount of money is important, but then they could easily go out and 8 months in get it. They have to reshop it on their own. So really, a year down the road, although they started out paying less, everybody in the program could be paying more. Like, there's no real safeguard with market fluctuations. People obviously can get aggressive on their own, opt out, go back, find it, but if they're that type of person to begin with, they probably don't want to be in a program that we're making up their mind and having it so they don't really go shop it. Some people get very diligent. So if you could address those two questions. And one other thing that is...
Can I answer that? That's a mouthful. Can I answer that?
Yeah, go ahead. Those are
remember all three when you get to your third.
that seem to keep coming up as questions. So you can give some clarity on.
Yeah.
Oh, one other thing though. Why is commercial?
Jim, let him
Okay,
answer.
go ahead.
Answer those, yeah, because I definitely will forget let me just get the first thing. Go ahead. So the 30-day question. So the opt-out process, that's the state mandated process, right? And actually the law, the first 4 years it was in place in the late 90s, early 2000s was an opt-in program, and it was a colossal failure. It did not work, and at the time, at the early part of that, I was actually still at the BPU, and then I was sort of out, so I've seen both sides of it. And it just does not work because you have this chicken and egg situation where folks don't want to opt in until they know the price, but suppliers are not going to bid a firm price until they know how many people are in the program. And so it just, I'm oversimplifying a little bit, it just did not work. So the legislature actually changed it to an opt-out. The 30-day was done, I think a pragmatic response, because you're right, you want to give people enough time. But on the other hand, the more and more lead time between when suppliers bid and when the program starts, that's more time that elapses and markets can change and things like that. So the 30 days was sort of strike a balance. I'm not saying a 60 days couldn't work either. It probably could. And in fact, the 30 days is a mandated minimum by the state. So I've never seen a town do it, but I suppose if a town wanted to put in a 60-day opt-out period, you probably could. As long as the supplier knows in advance and you build in enough lead time in the process, you could probably do that. Okay, so that's the first one. The second question about changes in markets. So the contract price itself is flat, right? That doesn't change. The only reason that folks would stop saving money is if the utility rate dropped, right? That would be it, right? So, and this is now kind of where I think maybe differentiates, and this is maybe a little bit of a commercial, but where different people that help you maybe differentiate themselves. One thing we always do is not only look at the current tariff price, but look at where we think the tariff price is going over the life of the contract. And you can actually model that fairly accurately if you choose to, because of the way the utility buys its power in staggered 3-year contracts. and you know what the market prices are, so you can predict this fairly closely. And I can tell you that it's not uncommon that we've actually had a bid come in for a town where it was just a little bit below the tariff price, but we were forecasting that 10 months from now, the tariff was going to drop by 5%. So we recommend a town not award a contract. I mean, we've done that many times, to our financial detriment. But listen, we've been doing this a long time. We think it's more important to have a good reputation. So you address it twofold. The one is you have someone knowledgeable and, hopefully honest that is advising you on whether or not to award a contract. And then secondly, you also build into the contract that if in the unexpected event that the tariff price drops a year from now more than the savings margin you had, the supplier is obligated to send a mailing out, a mailing that is the wording of which is reviewed by the town, to notify folks that the situation has changed and providing them information on how to opt out of the program. And so that's how you protect yourself as best you can. I mean, my short answer is if it's close and it's questionable whether it's going to stay below the tariff for the whole life of the contract, I wouldn't recommend an award of the contract. That's how I would handle it. Those are the two. I know those are the first two questions you had.
And we can move on, but the all commercial industrial being left out is a little frightening, because what I'm hearing, and I may have misunderstood, is they are probably, I don't want to say polluters, but the biggest issue with the environment and carbon footprints and everything else. They were conveniently kind of left out, or it's not practical, so why wouldn't they want to get involved? Why wouldn't the government and local or state want to make it so that this is a group effort? If the whole thing's about buying power in numbers, why are we leaving out? And, that just seems a little odd, to reconcile why they have a better way to get it less expensive. But maybe you can comment on that. Now, is rental complexes also left out of the equation? Because we have a lot of rental complexes in town. I'm just wondering, would they be part of it, automatically opted in?
Any residential account with PSE&G is eligible. So if you're a rental, you have a utility account in your name, you're eligible.
Okay, and the last thing I'll leave, and this is interesting, whatever way we may go forward with this, whether it's through, see where the referendum goes, or if we change referendum, most of the ones I've seen the last year that are successful, the new trend is to have multiple towns. I know this one here, Hunterton Area Energy Cooperative. There's multiple towns in the same area because the whole concept is cheaper prices through larger buying power. So wouldn't we be best off as a town to involve a few other municipalities, since they seem to be the programs that get put in place sooner and not have to get as many bids refused? Because, like what you said, if they're costing people money, we legally can't go in the contract. That's what I've been coming up with, that there's been some real good ones, but they're regional ones.
Yep. I mean, yeah, we've done a bunch of those regional co-ops as well. So the answer is yes, in theory, and in practice sometimes. A bunch of towns can go out and get a little bit better price than a town on its own. But the big but is you need to find towns that, A, are on the same page philosophically, procedurally, because everyone's got to agree on timing and on the exact bid specifications and portfolio content, all this kind of stuff. So we've found that the groups that have worked the best, we've done a few of them, are those where those towns have a lot of pre-existing close relationships and business arrangements together where they work well together. That's one. And secondly is they need to have, this is getting a little technical, but they all need to have a similar customer usage profile, because that dictates the price. So if you have a few towns together that get along well and they're close geographically, but their load profiles are different, you're going to wind up one town subsidizing it, or one town's residents subsidizing another, and the load profile is more influential on the price than the volume discounts, if you will. So you need all those things to be in place. If that's the case, absolutely. But I've had towns where they've been working with other towns trying to get a consortium together, and then they wind up sort of cutting bait, going out alone because they didn't want to wait any longer for the other town to pass their ordinance and all this other stuff. And then second time around, now the other town wanted to jump on, and they were moving quickly. So just because you go alone the first time doesn't mean you might not join with a group the second time. Sure.
Mr. Potaznik.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Bob, for being here, and to the committee that put the petition together. We appreciate you sort of lighting a fire under us. I think at least some of us do, to really tackle what is something that hurts our health. Dirty air, we breathe it, we get asthma, we get cancer, terrible things for our children and especially our elderly. And then also, I think we don't have to look very far in the past to see the devastating impacts of climate change in our own town. Hurricane Ida, neighbors in the first ward still not in their homes, empty, waiting for FEMA money. And that's a really hard thing. I think we're all scrambling, but we allowed folks to just put stuff on the streets, and we did a great job getting bulk pickup throughout the township. But there really wasn't a ward that wasn't touched by Hurricane Ida. And we know more frequent and intense storms are going to come because of climate change, because of fossil fuels, and everyone needs to do their part. We don't wait for China. We were asking America to reduce its carbon load. We don't wait for Trenton, we look to Franklin to reduce its carbon load. And if we all are doing our part, we can help save lives. In fact, in New Jersey, 30 people died in Hurricane Ida. 2 were sucked down a drain getting out of their car that got flooded. So, lives are on the line, too, not just in health and otherwise. And so, to me, as I hear what you're saying and learning about this issue, it seems like the bulk purchasing power in a town with, I don't know, I'll estimate, I was asking the township manager, whispering or sort of off the record, how many units do we have? Something like 28,000 meters likely in Franklin Township. We could push back against the Trenton monopoly that picked PSE&G and its suppliers to just come into our houses, right, and do something to save money and potentially do something more than what's happening in Trenton. I would say probably definitely more than what's happening in Washington, D.C. to combat climate change and save people money. So I have a couple questions in line with that. You talked a little bit about what happens if the price goes up, right, because that's something you enter a contract. What you don't want to have happen is suddenly the default rate would have been cheaper, and people are like, now, council did something that's making my energy bill higher. That would be really bad for all of us. We don't want that. And in a town like ours, where 7.5% are below the poverty line, which that's the federal poverty line. The real New Jersey poverty line is many times more than that, so it's very high. We have to be really careful about cost, and that's going to be something all of us are going to have to really wrestle with as we go through with it. So as the committee put together their plans, what I'm most interested in is how can we get the most carbon out of the atmosphere, the most toxic pollution, sulfur, acid rain, all the bad things you hear about, and save people money? So that's just my simple question. Is there a percentage that makes sense where we can go above the 24.5% that Trenton is currently requiring, that is, the monopoly that currently exists, that people just pay their bill into, currently is supplying? Can we do more for a better price?
So, doing more for a better price, no. Unfortunately, I'm going to say no. What you're doing is you're balancing, right? And what we always help towns do is sort of balance your priorities, because you've got a lot of them and you named them all, and they're all important. So what we're trying to do is design a product that, given the market conditions at that point in time, can help you be able to award a contract and make an impact. Because you could be really aggressive and just say, I want 100% renewable energy for everybody, because I think that would be great. Well, that would be great in theory, but you'll never get a price that's even remotely close to the utility tariff, so you really haven't accomplished anything, right? So you're just trying to strike that balance, given the market conditions, and they change all the time. This is going to be a long game, because right now, I'm sure you're all aware, in every energy market you can pay attention to, prices are extremely high right now. And the electricity energy market is no exception. So right now, today, we've done bids as recently as 2 weeks ago. Prices are much, much higher than the utility tariff. But that's going to change again. Those things ebb and flow. So what you want to do is be ready to pounce when the conditions are right. And then we would help advise you on what's the best product. And I've even seen towns maybe do a bid for 2 different types of products. And then you get price discovery. Well, I get this price for 10% extra and this price for 20% extra. And then at the time you get the bid, you can make an informed decision as to which way to go, given how that compares to the utility tariff. So there's no one right answer. It changes all the time depending on market conditions for RECs and for energy. But it's more an approach of giving you options and then helping you figure out how to balance your priorities. That's the best way I can answer the question.
So are you saying that if we went out for the current 24.5% now to aggregate all of Franklin, let's say,
Yep.
will we be then raising people's rates? No, because the law says we can't.
You would not. You would just not award a contract.
Do you think the market now is competitive enough that we would get a lower rate?
No. No. Today, no. I mean,
Even at the
I've been in
current
the
market?
marketplace. I'm in the marketplace all the
I can't
time.
hear.
Right now, no. But this program, you've got to go through a referendum, then there's a lot of steps involved. So you can't react quickly if you don't have a program in place when the market improves, right? So, but I'm being honest with you. I mean, we do bids all the time. My most recent one was 2 weeks ago. We weren't even close.
Right.
But, because it's the same conditions that affect, price of gasoline and heating oil and jet fuel and natural gas. It's all the same. Right now, it's just through the roof. And so it's not a great time, but that's going to change. These things go in cycles.
If we were to go forward with something like this, then each year we could go out there and see what the impact is going to be, a couple of test cases, the 10% more, the 20% more, and if it's not cost effective, we would just status quo, same old Trenton monopoly, but we'd always have the right to exercise to go a little further and do a little more while saving folks money.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I tried to emphasize at the outset is ultimately the decision is yours as a governing body. Passing a referendum or passing an ordinance does not obligate you to award a contract regardless of the market conditions. That's not so.
Yeah.
You do the bid process, and if it meets your criteria, you would make the award. If it doesn't, you do not. And I've done a lot of work for nothing, but that's we're in the business for that. That happens.
Yeah, because one of the things with the petition, and I think in some of the places where it went to referendum, I think we've seen this happen. We're hearing about towns, we're sort of looking into it, and it's coming out higher, and then it's causing all kinds of consternation. And it would be my preference to sort of grab the bull by the horns and, make sure we're doing it that aligns with our population, meeting climate goals, meeting the cost, interest, all at once, rather than set up a system that everyone's always opting out of anyway. And so I was disappointed, quite frankly, to hear you say no to the question that we could do better and save more right now. But I think what you're saying is that's temporal. That means it's just today. We're in a war. Well, we're not, but there's a war in Russia with Ukraine, and all kinds of gas prices are really off the charts, right? So there's issues there, and I really appreciate your honesty.
Yeah, and I've done, I've done, going back 10 years ago, I've done bids for towns where we were 10% above the tariff, and then we rebid 4 months later, and we awarded a contract at 15% below the tariff. So these things, energy markets are very volatile by their nature. Point is, if you have a program in place, you can do that. You can bid multiple times over a, 3 or 6 month period and see what happens,
Thank you.
And what's to your knowledge, how long has that trend been taking place that the bids have been over the market?
It's been a good 6 months now.
I was say about 4 months ago, we're a member of the New Jersey Sustainable Energy Joint Meeting for municipal power, for our electric bill. And they went out 3 months ago, and we're back with public
We did
service.
that bid.
You did that bid, there you go. So we're back with public service because of it.
Yeah, we had a great contract that was, we're only allowed to go out 2 years by
Right.
local public contract law. We had a great contract, and the market changed about 6-8 months ago, and we came in way above. So in
Right.
that case, we said everyone goes back to the
Reject
utility,
and go back to the
because
utility.
that's the cheaper option now, but that could change 6 months from now again.
Excuse me, I have one more question with
Hang on,
that.
you've asked a question, Ms. Francois, do you have a question? Okay, go ahead.
Bob, could you re-explain that so that the answer you give is clear?
Sure. So the township is a member of what's called a joint meeting. A joint meeting is a legal term for towns that come together and for a variety of purposes. In this particular purpose, there's, I guess, about 250, 275 municipalities in the state.
About 200, right?
Yeah, 200 that are members of this joint meeting called the New Jersey Sustainable Energy Joint Meeting. And it is, in essence, energy aggregation. We all have electric bills, all 200 and some odd towns in the town and in the state that are members have electric bills, and we go out to bid just like the town would go out to bid for this purpose for energy aggregation. And there is an emphasis on sustainable energy here with the Sustainable Energy Joint Meeting. But we don't pay more than what the tariff rate is. So in this particular case, our 2-year contract was up. The joint meeting went out to bid. It was like 3-4 months ago, if I'm not mistaken.
actually,
Maybe not even that long ago. Yeah, I was saying. I know it's
I think we
my
announced it
purchasing
about 4
agent came
months
to my
ago.
office and said,
Yep.
"We're back with public service again." But so because public service's rate was lower than the lowest bid, we do, as a municipality, what this discussion is about for the whole municipality. We just do it with other municipalities for our own electric bills. And we've done that for quite a number of years now.
But was that done only because the contract was up, the 2-year
In this
period?
particular case, yes, it's 2-year contracts, so every 2 years, there's this process takes place with this joint meeting. And like I said, when we've been a member at least 10 years. Well, no, more than that, because I've been here 10 years as manager. So it was before me, so
Yeah.
probably 12 or 14
But my
years.
question is, if that trigger hadn't happened, we would have still sustained in that
So-
contract period because it wasn't, the 2-year limit wasn't up?
Well,
Or we would have had to do
typically
something to
2-year
get out.
We're limited to 2-year contracts for electric supply under local public contract law. We can go 3 years for natural gas, but only 2 years for electric. So we do bids on 2-year cycles.
Mm-hmm.
And since, as you mentioned, since about 2009, we've consistently gotten prices below the utility tariff and saved, collectively saved a couple $100 million for, about $35-40 million collectively statewide for municipalities. And the markets, the markets have been fairly stable energy prices, but with this sudden
Volatility right now.
rise, when our most recent contracts were coming to an end and we went back to market, at that time, the market price had gone up much higher than the utility price. So the utility price is now, for the first time in memory.
First time in my history as
is
manager,
cheaper
we have been with a third-party provider for as long as I've been manager for our electric.
Okay.
So the difference might be about the renewable content was not higher in the municipal contract, is there?
In New Jersey SEM, it's traditionally been 5% higher. So, yes.
So it's really.
But it didn't matter.
But it didn't matter, no, to be
It's way
perfectly
more
honest, at the state mandated rate, it still would have been higher, the bid would have been higher.
Wait, hang on, everyone. I haven't asked any questions yet. So, what is the typical savings? I realize it depends on the fluctuation, but in the past, what is the typical savings per month for a customer?
Under this kind of a program?
Yeah.
I mean, I would say it's varied from, when the market has been favorable, it's varied from around 5% to around 15%, depending on market conditions, depending on the utility. Typically, traditionally, there were more savings in JCP&L territory than PSE&G, but generally it was in that range. Now, more recently, when it gets below 5, I get nervous that that's within the movement year to year of the utility tariff price. So I typically don't like to see an award below 5% savings, and that happens sometimes. But some towns, if it's got a high renewable content, they're willing to take that risk if it's a little bit below that. So I've seen savings as low as 2 or 3% get awarded on an RGEA, not on a standard contract.
But typically, you're talking about 10%.
Sorry?
Typically, you're talking about 10%-ish.
Well, again, all over the map, and I would say 10% is not possible now or in the foreseeable future. I think even if market conditions were to improve, I think you're looking at, 5% if you're lucky. It's not a huge savings, again, with the renewable content added.
Now, you said businesses don't usually profit from this because they're using energy differently and because they're probably have already opted into something. But what about, something like a lawyer's office or something like that?
So the vast majority of mid to large commercial industrial, they've been doing third-party supply for years. They have no interest in joining up the town. The only ones that have a lower market participation rate are the small, mom and pop businesses like that. The problem we run into with, specifically in PSE&G territory, is the way PSE&G sets the rates for commercial accounts. Literally every different business or every account has their own and different utility tariff price. So imagine going out to bid for a bunch of businesses and getting a quote for, let's say, 10 cents a kilowatt hour. Within that group of customers, you're going to have some that have an 11-cent tariff price to compare, some that have a 9-cent price to compare. By definition, you can't do it as a group because each one has its own price, and you'd have half the folks losing money and half gaining money. So that's sort of a technical reason why in PSE&G territory, it doesn't work. It's very hard unless you do a more complicated pricing structure like we do for New Jersey SEM, where the price is essentially different for every member to reflect their price to compare, so everyone saves the same amount of money. But if you try to go to a lawyer's office who's got a busy schedule and can explain to him, who doesn't have an energy manager, about all these details, his eyes would gloss over and he'd show you the door.
So I'm on call tonight. I just got called to your meeting.
Temporarily.
I'm sure the mayor will be back very, very soon. So I just wanted to, give folks on the council side of things last kind of bite at the apple before we move on in the agenda to allow the petitioners to ask their questions. Anyone else have any other additional questions? I did. I have one. And Carl, you had one?
Jimmy. Councilman Vassanella said, and I disagreed with it because I didn't understand it. I opt in, or what have you, I want to do the program solid. And later on down the road, you brought it up, but I wasn't sure how it was transmitted. I like that word, transmitted. The price went up. Somehow or another, we guessed wrong and my price went up, or I go in and out the program and I try to game the market system. But he mentioned something about credit score or something of that nature, and I didn't understand what he was coming through. There is no credit score, or you're poor, I'm poor, and I can't get the electricity, right?
There is not. There is one, and I didn't get into this, but this is sort of really in the weeds here. But it is a legitimate issue for towns that have a larger proportion of folks that have are financially challenged. You may understand. You may appreciate this. I don't know if anybody else, but this is really in the weeds. So as I mentioned, the program is premised upon one bill. So the supplier's bills are billed through PSE&G. That's called consolidated billing. Okay, that means the utility basically purchases the receivable from the supplier, and then they allow the supplier to bill through that. But they basically pay the supplier within 5 days of the due date, and then the utility's on the hook for collections. So PSE&G and the other New Jersey utilities, with I would say the BPUs, it's not in the rules, but they allow it to the process it's used. If a customer's bill is in significant arrears, then PSE&G deems them not eligible for consolidated billing. They don't want to take the risk for collection, they being the utility. So in that instance, they require suppliers to do their separate bill, and that's not how the program works. It only works through consolidated billing. So it's something that we've been raising, we as a firm have been raising with the BPU to no avail for a number of years now, that kind of a setup where if you're late in paying your bills, you can be basically booted from the program, not by the supplier, but by the utility. It's a form of disenfranchisement, really, for the folks who really arguably could use the savings the most. It is the way it's done, and that it isn't, we have that circumstance. We have towns, we do a program for Monroe Township, and they have got, they've got a ton of 55 and over communities, folks in electric heat, folks on limited incomes, and I've seen those things happen where folks are behind their bills. They get removed from the program because, in that case, JCP&L won't allow consolidated billing. And again, those are the folks who really could use the money the most, and they're not eligible. So that's something else. It's nothing that any of us here can do anything about, but when I'm talking to towns, I urge them to, go to the BPU and kind of make their voices heard on this, because I think it's a significant issue. And particularly, you were mentioning, it's a town where you have a significant segment of your population below the poverty line. I imagine there are some, a fair proportion of folks that are late on their bills, and they would not be eligible for the program. So that's something.
Can I just follow up on that, Deputy Mayor? What would happen to their lights? I get the billing and the thing and the whatever, but do the lights go off?
No effect. Whether you participate in third-party supply, supplier has no ability to shut your lights off.
Got it.
That's up to the utility and the moratorium periods and all the various things the BPU oversees.
So did I miss that if you haven't been paying your bills, you can't?
No. What Bob explained, that for certain folks that might be on the lower economic side of things, that may be in arrearages, they could be booted from a program like this, because while the supplier is providing the energy, the utility is on the hook for collections, and the utility might not want to encumber the risk of someone who is, in their view, proven to be an unreliable bill payer. Is that in a nutshell?
Yeah, essentially that's what the utility puts in place. If the account is more than 120 days in arrears, then they will not accept them for eligibility for consolidated billing. So when the supplier goes to enroll that customer account in the program,
They would get
the
bounced
utility
back.
will boot it back and say no.
So those people wouldn't be able to participate in that.
And just on the flip side, if I clarify, Deputy Mayor, so I believe you had taken a question.
Well, I wanted to
Councilman
ask
Wright.
a question.
Right. Well, Councilman Wright was saying something. I just want to be clear. We were discussing offline because I think we both want, but we have wards where we have concerns and we want to represent the people accordingly. The flip side of that, so we had just started getting that conversation offline. I know this could probably go on for hours, but importantly, if somebody doesn't know, because we were talking about opt-in, opt-out periods, and I was saying I was glad to hear that we can work in a 60 or 90-day opt-out period. I didn't know we were legally allowed to. And Councilman Rice says something, well, if they get in and they didn't mean to, they could just opt out. And that's when we started talking about if somebody is in the program, whether they knew they were being put in and they didn't opt out because they didn't know they needed to, or they wanted to enter it. If they go to switch for whatever reason back, and they're having any financial issues with they're with the third party that, say, is all arranged, and you guys found us one, if they want to go back to PSE&G or wherever, depending on their account status and other financial aspects, does the, as you referred to them, default, PSE&G, are they allowed to ask for a deposit or any other concerns if somebody's coming from a third-party company?
Has no
No.
impact whatsoever.
So they're not allowed, so financial situation of their account would not matter. They'd still be given free choice without any
If they
additional.
were already in arrearages, they would get bounced back. They wouldn't be able to join the program, so they would.
But if they were already in the program, would they be able to go back seamlessly without any,
It would go back seamlessly.
no
because-
deposits for your utility?
No,
Okay.
because again, the utility, they've been buying the receivables the whole time, so there's no change whether or not the customer is with the third-party supplier or them. That doesn't change the utility's risk
Okay.
or payment structure.
All right.
So there's no change in that.
And just so that, then they're going to ask questions
I
next.
wanted to ask
Okay. The
a
period,
question.
though, do you, we,
Hang
go ahead.
have a 90, 60 hours.
So this, I think this question actually segues us nicely to the next agenda item. I did want to just, for my own possible edification, just clarify. I know I brought up commercial being higher usage than residential, but I just want to make it clear in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, the transportation sector is the biggest problem. I guess also just clarification from my colleague about the Trenton monopoly, because I know we have 7 regulated utilities, so I didn't know if you meant the utilities or the Trenton's deciding what percentage of clean energy and making that decision. But my actual question, and I obviously invite my colleague, Councilmember Potasnik, to clarify that for me, is that I don't know if you've seen the referendum that kind of triggered this conversation, and if you had seen it, because I know what you presented and the questions that we're asking you are based on a self-induced aggregation plan, right? So, I had, the question I have is, have you seen this referendum? In your professional opinion, if you can tell us what you think in terms of success, if it's good, right? And then the second part is, you mentioned that there's at least 12 municipalities that are happy campers with energy aggregation. Can you tell us how many of them were directed by, I guess, a petition referendum, and how many came to the promised land on their own?
Okay, so sure. So I have not looked specifically at this referendum, but I'm generally aware of similar referendums, in the area. And, in this current market environment, if it looks like the other ones I've seen, it's pretty ambitious, with respect to being able to achieve, savings, right? The higher the renewable content, the more challenging it is, particularly if there's a challenging energy market already. So I'm not going to opine specifically on this referendum because I haven't seen it, but my general understanding is that these referendums tend to be pretty ambitious on the renewable, which is good in theory, but, in a adverse market can make it a pretty challenging endeavor. I always, I come from my regulatory days. I like flexibility to react to conditions on the ground. So I tend to opt for language in anything, referendums, resos, whatever the case may be, or ordinances that provide the town a lot of flexibility given the circumstances at the time. That's my general preference. So maybe I should stop there.
Okay, but as far as the 12, how many of them that you're aware of came to this?
I don't know that we have not worked with any towns that have done it through referendum.
Okay.
I'm aware of many, and some of those towns that have passed referendums have done a competitive process to hire a consultant. We have not been successful for whatever reason. So I think every town we've worked with has done it through the ordinance.
Okay. Through their own.
We can do it either way. We're fine with it. It just so happens that's why it's worked out.
I think you touched on the point that I think I was trying to get us at. So thank you.
I'll continue my questions. The do not disturb lists, does that have a expiration date, a shelf life?
No, well, the way we usually do it is as they go on, they stay on through I have do not disturb lists for some towns that are 10 years going now.
But
they don't have an official expiration date. They're just, the BP requires there be a list kept. So we keep it, when we manage it, we keep it as a running.
So we could start that as soon as we wanted and effectively give people a 90-day opt out.
Yep.
And then you mentioned the solar. If your solar system is set up in such a way that you never have a month where you don't pay a bill, so you're always buying some electricity, then it would, the way you put it, the way I see it, then it would still behoove you to opt in. Because you're not banking anything.
It's really the banking, right? If you every month, even in the summer, you still have a net bill, so you still have kilowatt hours that you're paying for, then yes. Now, solar is still probably satisfying a chunk of your energy usage, so you would not by definition save as much because there's not that much left to. Yes, if you don't have any banking in every single month, even in the summer, when the solar is putting out the most, you still have a bill that's, still has kilowatt hours on it that you're paying for, then yes, you would be, it would behoove you to be in the program.
Because you may want to re-examine that. Some people's solar systems may have been designed before they got an EV. And now with an EV, I had 3 months where I was banking. And now with an EV, I don't bank on any month because...
The problem is we have no way of getting each individual.
Uh,
So we have to do it on a broader basis. So the only thing PSE&G tells us is who has solar. We don't know anything else about whether they bank or not. So in our experience, the vast majority of folks that have solar, so they run the risk of losing some of that bank. So our fail-safe is to pull all those folks out, but then tell people exactly that. If you are one of those folks that doesn't rely on banking, then, if you want, you can certainly opt back into the program. But our default is to pull them out because the majority of people are better off without the.
Okay. Shall we move on to the petitioners? Okay. So if you could get them a mic. So you guys have unlimited time, just as we did, to ask questions, since you are the decision makers here. This meeting is more or less for you.
Well, I just have a few questions about the economics of the whole situation.
Speak up, Linda, we can't hear you.
It's on. You just have to...
I just have a few questions on the economics from your presentation. Are the prices this bad because of this recent rise, like in the gasoline prices, and what's the real cause of the
Cause is natural gas prices are up, which drives the cost of electricity. There's a lot more volatility in the energy markets. It gets very complex, but it's related to the ongoing turmoil in all energy markets over the last year.
Is it just the last year or the last few months?
Well, it started about a year ago, but it sort of accelerated about maybe 4 months ago. But there's been a gradual rise starting about a year ago, and then about, 4 months ago, it just took off.
Okay, but it's not because there's a gas shortage here, because we have more natural gas than we need in New Jersey. I've been told that for several years now.
Right, but the issue is that, part of the issue is that with the war in Ukraine, there's a lot more exports of natural gas overseas, so that takes gas out of the domestic market. There are other factors at play. Weather was really cold this past winter, so natural gas storage inventories are lower than they normally are. I mean, I would say it's basically a perfect storm of geopolitical, economic, weather, the whole 9 yards.
And the other thing is, as renewable sources become more available, you're saying the prices are going up.
Well, no, basically it's supply and demand, right? So if demand goes up quicker than supply, the price is going to go up. But if the market responds and a lot more renewable is built at a rate faster than the requirements are going up, then the price should stabilize or even come down. So it's purely supply and demand dynamics.
So it's been your experience then that it's best to do this program through an ordinance versus a referendum?
I think I'll probably take a pass on that. I don't have, my answer to the question was simply, I like language that provides the town flexibility in terms of how they design the program. I presume that could be done through either an ordinance or a referendum, so I'm not going to opine on that.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Is it,
Gotta get close to the-
would you be able to advise the township or introduce them to other townships that are looking and they want to go together? Or the township itself would be part of the group in the state for commercial can do this? Meaning that if you have number of townships coming together and getting aggregate energy, because that seems to be more powerful to get it done, if it's possible to get it done. But at the same, originally that was my question, but when Bob talked about the fact that you are part of the, state groups. I thought maybe that would be a way. Is it possible? Or the township can talk with them and bring some people in, or you can do that?
Yeah. So, well, I mean, it can work either way. As I said, it's been proven to be more successful when towns who sort of have a natural affinity and a working relationship get together. So that would sort of suggest it might, it might come from the township as opposed to, someone outside party trying to force it together. But also, again, there's the potential for added economies, but there's also potential downsides in terms of different priorities, different time frames, and different load profiles, as I mentioned. So it's not a fait accompli that a large group is better or would accomplish it quicker. And I also add that this is, in terms of the number of households in the town, this is a big town. So that you have plenty of buying power on your own. I've done towns much smaller than this one successfully. So it would be nice to pursue that, but it's not necessary.
Thank you. My other question is that I forgot what you said about getting having gas involved rather than electricity.
It doesn't work. The PSE&G prices natural gas for residents in a very favorable way. Even today, what you're paying for natural gas this last winter, me too. I until recently lived in New Brunswick. Very, very cheap compared to what the market prices were. So I've never seen even a potential for any savings on the gas side, so I didn't think it was worth anyone's while. And I still believe that.
Yeah, my concern is not about the money, and my concern about the frack gas that you are using.
Well, right now there's no alternative. That's the other issue. You really couldn't do an RGA program for natural gas because there are no renewable. There's really no practical way of doing that. I suppose you could contract over with renewable natural gas, but it would be super expensive. It's already higher priced in the market than the utility, and then if you wanted to buy renewable natural gas, the price would go astronomical.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you for your presentation.
Sure.
By the way.
You're welcome.
Could we're talking about going with other towns. We have 3 very small towns that we border on. Could they be opt-in? Could we just have citizens from those towns opt in?
So each town, by law and by rule, has to pass their own either referendum or ordinance. They have to do that.
Okay.
So what you would essentially do is you would form a cooperative pricing system, and if you were to join with 3 other small towns, presumably Franklin Township would be the lead agency. Register the co-op with the DCA, and those other towns
like
would pass resolutions joining your co-op.
Sounds like a lot of work for very little payback.
That was my point. It's very. I've worked with aggregation groups. It can work, but it's time consuming, and it makes you a lot less nimble to react on your own.
Like we could potentially be subsidizing those 3 smaller towns.
And that's what I wonder, is the smaller town generally subsidize the bigger or the other way around?
There's no pattern.
No pattern?
It's a function of how your residents use their energy, which is a function of housing stock. New Brunswick's got a really good low profile because they've got a ton of student housing units that are empty in the summer.
Yeah.
So less summer usage is generally better. So each town has its own very unique housing stock and demographics and all that good stuff. So no, size has really very little to do with it. Low profile.
I just want, for informational purposes, that Councilman Vasanella had mentioned a Hunterdon County cooperative. So Hunterdon County as a whole has 130,000 people. Franklin Township has 70,000 people alone. So many, many very small towns in Hunterdon County might be able to benefit since their profiles would be very similar.
Right.
Rural communities that have, large houses on large lots and use energy in a similar way, and that's why they can benefit from creating a syndicate, so to speak, of municipalities to do this. We would basically comprise all but one town in Hunterdon County by population. Raritan Township would probably be the odd man out, and we would be the equal to every other municipality in Hunterdon County together.
Right. But Bob, just need for clarification, I mentioned Hunterdon Area Energy Cooperative, HAEC, because that's what it's called. However, let me be very specific here. because I could be wrong, but with part of the issues with the cost now, these are the only programs that seem to be getting out there and getting real savings. It started with 3 towns. It's grown over 2 years, 16 towns in 4 different counties, including Morris. There might even be some in Somerset in it. So I can understand why the manager thought it was Hunterdon County. It's called Hunterdon County Cooperative. 4 counties and 16 towns are involved, including Morris, towns in Morris County and 3 other counties. So I'm not saying we should do it this way or not do it this way, but there's a reason why the trend is quickly going in the direction of cooperatives, which increase the buying power, and they obviously reconcile the issue you're talking about, different demographics or different usage, because otherwise, I don't know, this is everything I'm coming up with. I don't know if you're familiar with, but so there's a reason why it's trending that way.
Right, a couple things. That group started with just 2 towns. Before that it was a separate, it was just 2 towns, Flemington and Raritan Township, which we did that one for. And then it very gradually grew. I don't know, we're not involved in that program anymore, so I can't speak to whether those towns all marry up low profile-wise or anybody looked at that issue. I don't know. It could be. But my main point is, that was a 10-year process to get where they are now. Like, to put together a 14-town consortium, that was through many iterations over time. So
it says 2 years. Hang on.
You grow sort of organically over time. If you try to put together a group from the outset of that many towns, you may spend 2 years putting it together and do nothing in the meantime. That's my only point.
Ms. Powell, do you have another question?
I have a question, but I also just want to make a comment. My question has to do, we've been talking about opting out. What if people at the beginning opt out because they're wary, they don't really understand it, and then as they learn more, they decide that if they think it's a good idea, can people opt in?
They can. People can come back in, yep.
And, Ed Potasnik, Councilman Potasnik said a lot of what I was thinking of saying, that our whole rationale for doing this is to protect the environment and to make the world a safer place, and not to have to pay more for our energy. Unfortunately, we don't have much control over the costs. That's the corporations that are raising it, whether it's a real need or not. So, in terms of some of the concerns that some of the other council people, like Jim Vassanello, was expressing, prices may go up for people who aren't in this program if the companies want to raise prices as well. So the idea that we're doing something good and that a lot of people like myself may not be able to afford solar panels, or people who live in apartments or certain communities where they're not allowed to put up solar, can be contributing to a lower carbon footprint, is the whole idea of this. But I like the idea of being somewhat flexible in terms of how fast we go into this. Obviously, the quicker the better, because we may not have time to do that much. We all have been watching the fires in California and the floods on the East Coast. Well, we had a fire here over the weekend where I think it was 11,000 acres of woods were destroyed in Jersey, and we're not even really in a drought. We just had a few dry days. So, things are happening much faster than we'd like them to be happening, and we've got to act fast to slow things down. And I think that was the whole idea of this, not to, and I think in the future, if we start this and other towns around want to join with us, that would be a great idea. Some towns are doing something similar already, and maybe we could form a bigger entity eventually. So I just wanted to say that.
Barbara, you wanted to?
We are going to go to referendum for this one, and if I understand it correctly, we have the township has it 1 year to join. After that, it would be null and void, or we still have that possibility.
That's a referendum question. We'll ask the township attorney that. He's not here, but we'll ask that later.
Okay, thank you. because I heard people saying we can do it faster or slower and all that. The government process of democratic process is longer usually, and I was wondering, that was my concern. But I really think we have talked about, at least I have talked about this for years. I think the planet is burning, and we are in a horrible situation, and nobody mentioned COVID. COVID didn't come because of its own. Our environment has an incredible impact on going to get and living with these pandemics forever, as far as I'm concerned. When this started, they said it would be about 3-4 months. And when I told people we are going to be living with this because we are not taking care of the environment, and it still is going on and it will go on. And as Linda said, we have no control over energy companies. Look at this. They have making 3 times more profit in past 6 months. And people are having a lot of problem getting gas, but they don't give a damn about it. And our government, federal government is not capable or are not doing it because many of them are invested in that. And many of them their pockets are being filled with that. So at least what we can do as citizens is do something that at least we can tell our grandchildren, I did something. Thanks.
Okay, so do we have a motion to open to the public?
So moved.
Second.
Moved in second. All in favor of opening to the public, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion is carried. We're open to the public. There are not many people here, so we can be flexible. There can be a bit of discussion between people. No filibustering, please. I reserve the right to end a filibuster. But it looks like Ms. Sedan wants to come up.
Thank you. Robin Saddam, Skillman's Lane. So as I understand it, whether we go referendum or ordinance, we'd really be saying to the town, we want to put all the pieces in place so we're in the ready stage. And then we could choose when we want to execute it based on the timing and the volatility of the market. And if we want to get ready, if we go the referendum route, we have to go the referendum route. And if it gets defeated because we're in the middle of a very volatile energy market, to come back with another referendum a couple years down the line might be difficult because the town's already said no, or the town's people. Whereas if we go an ordinance route, the decision makers are there with a lot of input from us, but you could put all the pieces in place because you really only have to convince what get ready means to a smaller group or in planned public meetings where people can come hear about it.
Oh, I'll stick my neck out and we'd have to check with the attorney, but the referendum could say, get ready, and council will say when to go.
Yes, we just have to get to everybody who's a voter, which is a lot of people.
Right.
And have them understand that if the energy market is still as volatile as it is right now.
And our petitioners would have to agree to that.
Right. I understand that completely.
Right.
I'm just trying to set up the columns in my head about what's the best strategy for us, because Manouche knows I'm in complete agreement about our effect on the environment, and the sooner we can give people an accessible way to do their part, the better. I'm just hoping we can find the way that most people are going to be shaking their head yes, instead of being very skeptical. So I'm just checking my assumptions. Thank you.
Okay. Councilman Chase?
Theodore Chase, 159 Old Georgetown Road. Is it possible, when asking for bids, to ask for bids both at the 24.5% renewable level and at a higher renewable level, and then council to choose which one to accept?
Yes, it is. In fact, we worked with Plainsboro Township for several iterations of their program, and that's the way they've done it every time. And they make a decision based upon the information in front of them, whether which way to go. And they've done, I think, a standard product once and a enhanced renewable product twice.
Anyone else wishing to speak?
Good evening, members of the council. I'm Charlie Cradaville. I'm the Central Jersey organizer with Food and Water Watch. And thank you very much to Mr. Chilton for a very informative presentation. And also want to say thank you to the 2,000 plus township residents who signed the petition to get this initiative this far along. We did assist with the petitioner and creation of the ordinance language that's before you. And in light of the short-term pricing pressures, we set forth a modest 35% renewable starting point for any contract awarded before the end of 2023. It does accelerate in an ambitious way to get to 100% renewable by the end of the decade. We did include, I think this is what Monaje was referring to, a one-year period of time to get the program up and running from when an ordinance is adopted, either by the voters or this council. And we feel that this is an appropriate way to get such a program started. That said, I won't speak for the petitioners, but as an organization, we're comfortable making adjustments to the language that was drafted and would support changes to the timeline and the standards in there. But I will say that there is some urgency. Waiting 5 more months to have an election get certified is 5 more months that the climate crisis will be getting worse. 5 more months of time that we lose in reversing the damage that's already been done. And I would say, in my own experience as a New Brunswick resident, where we had a successful first round of a program, we were able to achieve a cost savings at not only a 50% renewable product, but 100% opt-up level that was cheaper than the PSE&G rate. Unfortunately, the markets have changed, and that has had to be put on pause. But I think after what you've heard tonight about the existing situation and the how fast these things move, it would be in everybody's best interest to come to agreement on language that could be adopted this summer, and ideally before the deadline that you've set to decide whether or not it's going to the ballot. And so I would just thank everybody for having this meeting tonight and all their contributions, and I for one will make myself available to speak about this with any of you and answer any questions you have for me, and I think Monaje wants to speak now.
I think we need, as I've talked with some people here, we need aggressive education. And I'm sure we have Food and Water Watch helping doing that, but I don't know how much Township can put that information out, and some videos that we have out to everybody that are registered to get Township information, and also on the TV. I have talked to some people who say they watch TV. So put it on TV all the time and talk about this, and remind people we have no control of what the energy prices are going to be, period. And at least we can do something, and we can make some financial benefit, of course. Thank you.
I wanted to say something. I heard that there was some pushback for people who are saying that they felt that they were being forced into it, or some kind of social program or something. And I wonder if these same people complain about being on the township water. I mean, I happen to have a well, but if my well were dry, I'd be happy to get water supplied by the township. We're on the sewer system. There are the friends of mine who have septic tanks. Some of them probably are happy with their septic tanks, and others would prefer to be on the sewage system. I think it's the same kind of program. I mean, if we're kind of all in this together, I don't know anyone who's living totally off the grid in Franklin, and I think that this is a way for us to participate in renewable energy, and as Robin stated, to contribute to lowering our carbon footprint. And people should be glad that it's an opportunity to do that And if they don't want to, they don't want to. You know, they don't have to be on the sewer system, and they don't have to be on the water system either. So anyway, that's all I have to say.
Okay. Anyone else from the public wishing to speak?
Seeing no one else from the public wishing to speak at this time, I move we close public comment.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor of closing public comment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Public session is closed. Any final comments from council? Any final brief comments from council?
It just seems to me like maybe there was a few folks that were meeting. We could get back together. I think it was myself, Councilman Francois, Mayor Kramer, Deputy Mayor Pruitt, and the committee. We could, given the information that we learned, digest that a little bit and see what, as to Charlie's point, we could do to look at language that takes into account the current energy prices and also, being aggressive to do our part to reduce climate impacts and reduce, pollution. I think it would be helpful. I think we learned a lot tonight. I want to thank really everyone for their time and just the candor. Again, your answer to the question when I said, can we save money at the same percentage? You're like, no. I was like, oh, no. Like, that's not what I expected. But this is just a moment in time, and that is probably accurate for today. We'll be here for a long time, and the problem wasn't caused today. It was caused many years ago. So we got to start sometime, somehow, some way. So look forward to that.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it was a great presentation, and we really appreciate your candor. And we learned a lot tonight, and I think you've given us enough information so we can figure out what our next step is going to be. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I too would like to thank you for coming. I would just throw in this one statistic. 100,000 Americans a year have premature death due to fossil fuels. So this is a laudable goal. With that, we are adjourned. Oh, I'm sorry. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. We are adjourned. Be well, Franklin.